Money Radio, discussing the business of making and spending money.
Good day to all of you, our loyal followers, and those of you who are following us for the first time. It is my pleasure to welcome you to another edition of Money Radio on Leadership Podcast. And this is the national economy segment of the program. Money Radio comes to you weekday, 2 p.m. Nigeria time to 2:30 p.m. The topic we are discussing today is how Nigeria can curb crude oil production deficit. Crude oil production deficit, how Nigeria can curb that. And in the studio to discuss that with me is Mr. Anthony Uko, our delectable Mr. Anthony Uko. So you're welcome to the program today.
Thank you.
And I'm your host, Case Hammond. Today's program, how Nigeria can curb crude oil production deficit. The topic is an appropriate one because Nigeria is losing so much, and we'll put that into perspective as we go into the program. But the thrust is this: Nigeria being a member of the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, plus Russia, Kazakhstan, OPEC plus. Nigeria has a daily output target. Yes. And each country that is a member of that organization or that cartel has its own quota or is given quota. And the reason they give this quota is because they don't want to flood the market with crude oil so that the product doesn't go too expensive or too cheap. Yes, so it's a way of monitoring the price or determining the price of crude oil on the international market. And so Nigeria's crude oil quota for the day currently is around 1.614 million barrels. However, Nigeria has over the past several months failed to meet that quota. And that is what we want to discuss. Why Nigeria has failed to meet that quota. Nigeria has been producing, take for example, the month of December, Nigeria produced less than 1.2 million, leaving a deficit of more than 400,000. If you put that into perspective, or if you put that into monetary value, you have something like 400,000 times, for example, the current price of crude oil. The current price of crude oil is around 90 as of yesterday. The price of crude oil, according to national economy data on page 2, is just around $90. So if you multiply that $90 by 400,000, you're getting up to a billion plus. Yes, and if that is not curbed, we'll be having more than a billion that is actually lost to crude oil production deficit. And that is why we are discussing. Instead, I've talked too much. The floor is yours. Why are we going through this problem?
Um, the country has been experiencing this, like you pointed out, for a, a long time now. And part of this deficit that the country suffers stems from the fact that the big monster-headed issue of crude oil theft. By the time the pipelines are vandalized, as many of the as a lot of crude oil theft takes place, a lot of the oil that is brought up is lost and is not accounted for in the overall um, output that is computed at the end of the day. And also, we see this happening much, much more because of all the oil rigs, all the oil wells not producing up to capacity. Nigeria has the capacity to produce 2.2 million barrels per day, but it hasn't even come near anything close to it in recent years. And this we also see it as a result of lack of investment, enough investment going into these rigs, these oil wells to keep them productive year round.
So as you're analyzing this issue, it puts a kind of fear in me as to how Nigeria intends to fund the current budget because if my memory serves me right, the budget is predicated on a daily production of 1.8 million barrels a day.
Yes, 1.88 million barrels per day, and we saw that also it's just for 2022 is 1.88 million barrels. In 2021 we had 1.86, and throughout last year we can say that Nigeria's output was an average of, it was not even up to 1.4 on the average. And even while the cost of crude oil per barrel was going up, Nigeria was not able to maximize that increase in the price of crude oil because of its shortfall, the said deficit in production output. And then it left a lot of room for borrowing to fund the budget deficit. And right now, even as the price of crude oil is going higher and higher by the day. We've seen 90, and there are forecasts of it going far beyond that. Nigeria is still not able to harness this um, improvement in the price of crude. And of course, that is very worrisome because it means that the country will still have to fall back on borrowing, increasing the nation's debt
So,
bill to fund the project.
you know, there is a positive side of of that scenario, but the positive side is that the benchmark of crude oil, benchmark for the price of crude oil
Yes,
is around 62.
$62.
And so since the price of oil now has gone to 690, that means at least that deficit is made up by the price. The price makes up for that deficit, albeit to some extent. But that is a missed opportunity because if we have a benchmark of $62 and you have price of crude oil at $90, and then you have the uh, production
Mm,
we meet the target of production.
mm,
That is a windfall, and that is
yes.
something you can use to invest in other
Mm,
critical sectors of the economy, including the much needed infrastructure that we always talk about.
yes.
Infrastructure in the form of roads, rail, electricity,
Yeah,
and other social projects. But
of
that is
course.
this will be a missed opportunity. How
Yes.
many missed opportunities must we
Must
experience?
Nigeria experience? In fact, you pointed that out, that a plus, that could be a plus. But I tell you that Nigeria has not experienced that as a plus in our current, the way things are currently run, because you seem to have forgotten the issue of fuel subsidy, which has always robbed the country of any extra income that could have accrued from increase in crude oil price. because the more price of crude oil goes up, the higher the cost of importing petrol for local consumption.
That is serious. And we were awakened to some people would say rude shock, but I know that it's not a rude shock to you. It's something that you say that I'm talking about or I'm talking to. I know it's not a rude shock to you because when it comes to the issue of subsidy removal, you are one of those who I suspect who doesn't want the subsidy to be removed so that we continue to enjoy low price crude and fuel. I am one of those two. I don't want it to be increased because things are hard. Things are hard. Come and deny now.
I'm not denying it. I'm not going to deny it. In as much as we would want to see crude oil, petroleum subsidy removed, um, because of the lost opportunities, like you
Yes.
pointed out.
Yes.
The money goes into funding
Subsidy.
subsidy, which can be channeled into so many other areas that need urgent attention, like health, like roads,
Yeah.
like a whole lot of areas need finances that will help boost the economy when they are all done. But this money keeps going into payment for consumption of petrol by Nigerians. And while it will be very, very good for that subsidy to be done away with, the authorities have not yet put in place the mechanisms that will ensure that once the fuel subsidy is eventually removed, that the masses can still breathe and stay alive.
Exactly.
Exactly. So, so removing fuel subsidy as it is like just pulling the news
Yeah.
completely on
Yeah.
the masses.
Yes.
So,
And of course, there may
based
be
on,
that could actually be social backlash.
of
I
course,
think those people who sat down and decided, look, let's shelve this issue of fuel subsidy removal, they must have gone into deep thought because it would have actually caused some kind of social backlash. There's no doubt in the fact that it would have caused social backlash. There's much more we can discuss on this, or we are going to discuss on this. Let's take it with We'll take a short break, listeners, and when we come back, we'll talk more about how production deficit is impacting on the Nigerian economy. Stay tuned.
For sponsorship and advert placements, please contact 080-3688-6158. Last Word Leadership Podcast Studio. You have the last word.
Money Radio, discussing the business of making and spending money.
Welcome back, viewers. You're still on to Money Radio and Leadership Podcast, and this is the National Economic segment of the program. We have been discussing the issue of reducing crude oil production deficit, and to discuss that in the studio has been Mr. Anthony Uko, and I've been your host, Keith Hammond. So we're talking about the impact of not meeting up to the country's quota, not the country's quota, OPEC's quota,
OPEC
yeah,
quota for the country.
for the country, and how it's affecting revenue for Nigeria. So you mentioned the fact that we need enough money at least to meet up with some of the country's infrastructure deficit. Now, with this trend going on, it will seem like government's hands are tied behind because this thing continues to go on. Just the other day, it will seem like the governor of Rivers State actually took an action that seems to have at least given or passed a message to the criminals. Governor Wike, Nyesom Wike, he's the one who did a little clampdown. Interestingly, some of those people who are supposed to be enforcing the clampdown on criminals are actually part of the business because we saw that there was a DPO who owns oil,
illegal
refinery.
refinery.
Yes, and said he produced up to 30,000, or one of them said he produced up to 30,000 liters of fuel a day. Imagine 30,000, even if you sell it at 100 naira, that is something, it's a huge income, daily income.
Yes.
And it's at
And
a loss.
and the crude is gotten from the theft
Yeah,
that we
he's
are,
not going to,
yeah,
to drill it.
to drill
It's
it
something he
or
just
to buy it from the international market. It's gotten from amongst the crude theft
Yes.
that we're talking about, that is contributing to the production deficit.
Now, before we get to other issues, this thing is actually affecting the country at large. When we say the country at large, because when it comes to crude oil theft, we see that some international oil companies, IOCs, have actually gotten wary about the issue and have started divesting their interest in the in the upstream sector of the oil industry. We see also that some of them have started moving offshore, and it's all because they want to avoid crude oil theft. That also, no doubt, discourages investment. Yes, and all of that is actually telling on the larger economy because that is loss of revenue in the long run.
Mhm. Yes, like you mentioned, many of the oil majors, the international oil companies, they've been divesting from onshore crude production, um, preferring to remain offshore where they have little or no relation with the communities, and then having, like you said, having their operations open to attack by these vandals who vandalize their operations and then in the bid to steal oil, crude oil, and the rest. So while this is for them, they are trying to avoid operational challenges. But for Nigeria, it's a huge loss of revenue and crude at the same time. And because of the vast investment that is required to keep these oil wells in operation, uh, the what should be done is to give them out back again so that production can continue. And that the Nigerian upstream petroleum regulator has been doing to give out the marginal fees, this time more or less to indigenous companies. But of course, like we mentioned, the issue of the vast investment, the huge investment that is required. Some have been given out, but others are yet there.
Now, do these local investors have the capacity to do mass production? That's on the one side. On the other end, do they have the capacity to avoid spillages? Because IOCs have failed to avoid spillages, which have degraded the environment. Do these local investors, potential investors, have the capacity?
That's what we've seen a lot of spillages over the years, and like what happened last year in November, that an oil well operated by one of the indigenous, but one of the top indigenous companies in Nigeria got um, busted, and it took close to 1 month to get it contained.
Hmm.
In fact, they had to bring in international experts to come in before they were able to get the spill under control. So these are issues that we're having when you know the indigenous companies, they would have to work closely with international partners. So it's more like giving it to an indigenous company and then getting them to look for funding partners from outside to partner with, to keep the operations going. So it still goes back down to what we are talking about, the investment that is required. And then on the other hand, when the field is not being is not given out, it goes into the custody of the NNPC. And if we look at the trend we've been seeing, where NNPC still owes for its own portion of funding of joint venture operations with the other IOCs. Your good is as good as mine. Your guess is as good as mine. What will happen when these oil wells go into the hand of NNPC? It means that NNPC will still be looking for funding from outside to keep these operations going. And of course, that comes down to impacting unfavorably with the bottom line output at the end of the day.
Now, let's look at another angle of this development. Oil companies losing to oil theft. That is, what we do, the amount of work we put into mining this oil is being lost. That is, lost energy on the part of the oil companies. But now, look at it from the other angle, and this is the angle that affects government. What we mentioned that in the month of December, for example, more than $1 billion was lost to production deficit. If it was because of that deficit, Nigeria would have produced more
Yeah.
and likely would have more revenue.
Mhm.
Now, how much is lost? To be frank, the sharing formula between the oil companies, that is the international oil companies, and the Nigerian government is 65 to 35. The oil companies take 65, the Nigerian government takes 35. So, what is actually lost in real terms? Take, for example, the month of December. What was lost by the government or on the part of the government? What was lost is like $350 million. What was lost on the part of the international oil companies is 650 million. But that is huge. If you take into consideration that that amount, 350 million, could have taken maybe the project ongoing between Kaduna and Kano, that rail, they would have taken that rail to a good extent, if not to finish it up.
Mhm.
We're talking about revenue to the second tier and third tier of government, that is the state and the local government,
Local government.
which are actually staffed right now, and they are actually uh, defaulting on salary payment,
Yeah.
and of course we'll talk about infrastructure. Let's not go there before because they have huge infrastructure deficit. But this thing happens month on month. That is a huge problem. It's a huge problem, and the country can't go on in this direction. What can be done? Is the security apparatus of the country that stretched? How can technology come in? Or how can technology be used to bring to curb this menace? Because it's actually a menace.
Yeah, it is. Um, I know that technology can play a huge role. However, I'm not the expert
Yeah,
in this field. But the onus is on our security personnel to the ante in terms of ensuring better protection of this oil facilities, knowing what is at stake here. That a huge lot is at stake when oil is lost, when uh, Nigeria does not end up getting what the crude that is explored at the end of the day. So that is left for the security personnel, the authorities involved to put all hands on deck and then put everything that needs to be put into it to ensure that the issue of oil theft is reduced to the barest minimum. Um, in addition to that, the issue of increasing the oil production wells is also there. So it boils down to having a lot of the oil wells, opened up for for them to operate more. I know that a lot of these wells were shut down during the COVID period. It's time that those wells were reopened and production increased so that with this one now that the budget is hinged on a 1.88 million barrels. If the production hovers around 1.2, then it's just it's a huge deficit.
that
And
is something in the neighborhood of 1.6 something. I know about
about
600,000
600,000
deficit.
deficit.
Something needs to be done.
Yeah.
So that's how we want to draw a curtain for today's morning radio. So it's been nice having you again. We always appreciate your analysis. Thanks to you, our producers. We say a big thank you more to you, our listeners, to those of you who follow us out there. It's a pleasure always having you. And it's because of you we are here. Morning Radio brings you analysis of things happening in the economy on a daily basis. I've been your host, Case Hammond. Until we meet tomorrow for another edition of Money Radio, the message from Leadership Podcast is COVID-19 is real. Stay safe and stay blessed. Have a nice day.
Thank you for watching. For sponsorship and advert placements, please contact 080-3688-6158. Last Word Leadership Podcast Studio. You have the last word.